All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're digging into a really big idea that's changing the way businesses think, the stakeholder model. We're moving past that old profit is the only thing that matters mindset. We're going to break down the 5 absolute cornerstones of a stakeholder-focused company, all based on a deep dive report from Virtualization Options LLC. Think of this as getting the architectural blueprint for a whole new way of doing business.
Okay, before we get into the thick of it, we've got to cover the important stuff. This is part 2 of a 10-part brief overview of a comprehensive research report on stakeholder business model, AI governance, and legal framework by Virtualization Options LLC. As you might expect, these explainers only discuss a fraction of what is covered in the full report, is not legal advice, nor does it come with any warranty expressed or implied.
So, here's our game plan. First, we're going to frame this whole thing as a blueprint, right? A plan for building a different kind of company. Then, we're going to construct that building block by block, looking at 5 key pillars: who the company answers to, how it defines a win, who actually gets a say, what its long-term goals are, and finally, the one thing that holds it all together: transparency.
Let's really lean into this idea of an architectural plan. The stakeholder model isn't just about a feel-good mission statement on a website. No, it's about designing a fundamentally different corporate structure, right from the foundation up.
So that's the big question, isn't it? What does this plan actually look like? What are the load-bearing walls that make a stakeholder company stand firm? And how do they all connect? That is exactly what we are about to unpack.
First up, and this one is the bedrock of the entire structure, accountability to everyone. This is probably the single biggest shift from the old way of thinking.
So multi-stakeholder accountability, what does that really mean? It means the company's circle of responsibility just explodes. It's no longer just about keeping the shareholders happy and maximizing their quarterly returns. Now, the company is on the hook to every single group that's affected by its actions.
And you can see right here who we're talking about. The model kind of splits them into 2 groups. You've got your internal folks, the people who make the company tick day to day, employees, managers, the board. But then, just as important, you have the external stakeholders, your customers, your suppliers, the communities you operate in, and even the regulators. This model says you have to seriously consider the impact on all of them in every single decision you make. Now, it just makes sense, right? If you're suddenly accountable to all these different people, your old definition of success just isn't going to cut it anymore. And that brings us to our second hallmark: success beyond profit. This means you have to start using what the report calls broader value metrics. The key thing to get here is that profit isn't ignored. It just becomes one piece of a much bigger, more interesting puzzle of what it means for a company to be truly successful.
And this is where the rubber really meets the road. It's like you're building a brand new dashboard for the company. Instead of only looking at revenue and stock price, you're now tracking your social impact, your environmental footprint, how happy and healthy your employees are. And let's be clear, this isn't just about feeling good. In a world where your reputation is everything, these numbers are absolutely critical for managing risk and building a company that can last. It's a total rethink of the corporate dashboard.
Okay, so you're accountable to everyone, and you're measuring all these new things. But how do you actually listen to all those voices? That's what leads us straight to hallmark number 3, giving stakeholders a seat at the table. And listen, this isn't about running an occasional online poll. We're talking about creating inclusive governance structures. It means you are formally and actively weaving those different perspectives right into the company's nerve center, where the really big strategic decisions get made. So how do companies actually do this? Well, the report points to some really clear, practical steps. You might set up official advisory panels with people from different stakeholder groups. You might literally bring community leaders into the governance process. Or you create dedicated channels to keep that conversation going. It's all about building the architecture for listening. When you start bringing all these voices in and tracking these new metrics, something interesting happens. The company's whole perspective naturally starts to shift. And that brings us to our 4th hallmark, a long-term vision. The focus moves from how do we do this quarter to how will we be thriving in the next generation. The report calls this a long-term orientation. It's a deep commitment to prioritizing things that will keep the company healthy and make a positive impact for decades, even, and this is key, even if it means taking a hit on some short-term profit. It's about playing the infinite game, not just winning the next 3 months. This quote from the source just hits the nail on the head.
In this model, spending money on environmental protection or developing the community isn't seen as some optional cost or a nice charity donation. Nope. It's a core, essential investment in the company's own future. It's just as vital as R&D or marketing. Okay, so what holds this entire beautiful structure together? How do you prove to the world that you're actually walking the talk? Well, that's our fifth and final hallmark, an unwavering commitment to transparency. This basically means the company promises to regularly and honestly report on how it's doing across all those broader metrics we talked about. It's environmental, social, and governance performance, or ESG for short. It's about showing your work to all your stakeholders. And this isn't just some voluntary pat on the back thing anymore. Companies are now expected to follow serious international standards, and more, there are actual legal requirements for this kind of reporting. At the end of the day, this is what builds real trust with everyone and makes that promise of accountability mean something. So, let's step back for a second and just look at the finished structure. We've put all 5 pillars in place, and now you can see the complete blueprint for a stakeholder-driven business. Let's just run through it one more time. It all starts with accountability to everyone. That forces you to create new metrics for success. To hit those metrics, you need inclusive governance, so all voices are heard. That naturally creates a long-term vision. And finally, transparency is how you prove you're actually doing it. You see how they all lock into place? It's a really elegant system. And that leaves us with one final thought. We've just walked through the architectural plan for a totally different kind of company. One builds on a foundation of shared responsibility and value that lasts. So the question for you is, now that you have the blueprint, how would you build a better business? Thanks for tuning in.